Hey everyone, welcome to the YMS podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Colin Mansfield. I'm joined as always by Seve Carnera. You want to say hi, Seve?
Hello, everybody. Good seeing everyone, and great seeing you, Colin.
As always, sir. Today we are excited to bring you another episode, and this week we're talking about the cold chain. When we say the cold chain, we're talking about reefer units. We're talking about how do refrigerated products get from point A to point B to point Z, and how can YMS be in the midst of that to help protect those products so that we can avoid spoilage and avoid having to loss of trailer and find things in the yard and the craziness that can happen. We've got a few things that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to talk about what is the cold chain, what are reefer units, and I mean refrigerated units when I say that. We're also going to be talking about how YMS fits into that, what features we have to address operations that are dealing in the cold chain. We're going to give you some cost savings and efficiency perspectives and some case studies and examples. And we're going to wrap up talking about future trends, things to kind of be on the lookout for within the cold chain, within the supply chain as a whole. So to kick things off, I think it's good to start with a definition. Seve, if you could just, for just a minute, talk to us about what is the cold chain. When I say cold chain, when I say reefer units, what does that mean?
Yeah, so in general terms, Colin, it's just making sure that you can manage reefer units or refrigerated units, not just necessarily inside of the yard, but also over the road. From the point of origin when it was first packed and put in the trailer, all the way to a gate, you have to manage that portion of it as well. But obviously, our emphasis is trying to make sure we manage that, monitor that while it's inside the yard, and we can manage, different types of data. For example, we want to manage first and foremost the set temperature of that unit. What's that thermometer dialed into, like you would at your home? Once you've set the thermometer, how is that temperature inside the reefer? Is it fluctuating up and down? Is it staying solid? What's that threshold in the event that it goes either above or below the temperature that it's supposed to be at? And defining that threshold. And then lastly, what's another real important part about this as well too is making sure that you have enough fuel inside of that unit as well too. Reefer units run independently of the tractor, so they have their own container or tank that runs that unit itself. And making sure that you always have enough fuel in that unit so that you don't have spoilage in the yard, again, is a big key feature that you also have to manage as well.
That's a great way to kick us off. And it brings up a couple good points. When an operation is managing these reefer units on site and they're, having to keep track of the temperatures and the fuel levels and where they are in the yard, it can feel pretty overwhelming. Been on site with operations who are doing temp checks very regularly, sending folks out into the yard, walking around with usually a pen and paper, tracking what is a reefer unit set at and what is it actually reading as far as the temperature, and then what's the fuel level. And they have to do that regularly. Not uncommon to do it at least once a shift, but operations I've seen are doing it way more than that, 12 times a day plus. So you think about the amount of time that goes into making sure that their product is safe, that they're not exposing themselves to risk. Seve, why are operations so focused on that level of we can't make a mistake?
Yeah, great point, Colin. So yeah, obviously the value of the product inside each one of those units is a big factor into that. Whether it be chocolate bars that are held at a certain temperature so they don't get that little white fuzz on them that you've seen when you open up a chocolate bar, all the way to vaccines, for example, during COVID, making sure that those were kept at right temperatures. Um, and we always tend to think as well too that it's always about cooling product. There's always opportunity there to where we have to warm up the product and keep it at a certain level as well too. I've worked with organizations that they have fluids inside of bottles or cans, and they want to make sure that stuff doesn't freeze, for example, in Canada. So those types of things are part of the entire process that you have to make sure that you understand. And it always helps when you understand your products well, and you can then determine what types of temperatures you need to keep those products, again, to minimize spoilage that may occur. A trailer full of chocolate, a trailer full of bacon is extremely expensive, and those organizations want to make sure that they mitigate at all cost any loss of product while that product is sitting outside in your yard.
Well, when one slip up could cost you millions of dollars in lost product, it really drives the point home. And unfortunately, a lot of the operations that we speak to realize that too late, and they experience some level of lost product or some level of spoilage, and they realize, oh shoot, if we keep doing things the way we've been doing them, this could get exponentially worse. There's operations out there, 3PLs or operations that manage other folks' facilities, who they're in danger of losing the contract if that level of spoilage is tolerated. So it really can be the difference between having a job and not having a job for many people that we speak with. And certainly for the organizations that own the product, it's the difference of millions of dollars. So this is very crucial. And this is why at our company, Yard Management Solutions, we've sort of carved out a niche for ourselves in cold storage. I think the general awareness, the general knowledge in the industry is improving and increasing about how valuable yard management is when you're talking about spoilage and things like reefer units. But the cold chain is encompassing more than just the yard, of course. There's, excuse me, these temperature controlled assets are being monitored all across the United States, all across multiple countries, all across the world, end to end for the supply chain. We've talked about this in the past, how the yard, by many operations that haven't sort of felt this kind of loss or sort of acknowledged that they're wasting time, wasting money at their facilities, the yard is sort of perceived as a bit of a black hole. But it's becomes first and foremost in an organization's mind when they realize that, wait, we're putting all of these resources, all this money, all this time into tracking assets and making sure that their temperature is good all the way. And then they get to a facility and we just lose track of them completely. Or we might know, but the facility doesn't. The distribution center doesn't. The 3PL doesn't, because they don't have access to those telematics. And that's where we come in. So providing that same level of visibility and control that a broker or a shipper or somebody who owns the asset, owns the goods, owns the sensors on those reefers has, and providing that to the facility. Sometimes they're the ones who are making the product, sometimes they're not. But in all cases, YMS is a crucial part of this cold chain. So how does that actually go down? I mentioned sensors. I mentioned how this tracking happens. One thing that I'll just kind of kick this conversation off with is it's very common these days for reefer units to have web connected sensors. There's a lot of companies out there that are providing really great telematics, great sensors that are reporting reefer fuel levels, temperatures. Even, a lot of times they're multi-use sensors, not just for the reefer unit, but for the driver, for the vehicle itself, and certainly for things like GPS and where that vehicle is located. The problem that we found is often facilities don't have access to that telematic data, or they have access, but they don't have the ability to integrate with an external system to provide them with awareness. So always our first question when we come in and we talk to an operation that is suffering from potential spoilage, or they've had it in the past, is, are those sensors available to be integrated with? Is that something that we can tap into to get the current real-time fuel level, set temp, actual temp, and get that fed into the YMS so that then we can provide alerts and awareness to users at the facility? That's always the best way to do it, right? A direct integration that feeds us the data that then we can say on our map of the facility, we can change assets different colors. As, for example, they need to be refueled, we can send automated alerts and messaging to management, to fuel trucks, to whatever, to let you know, hey, you've got a problem, or better yet, you don't have a problem yet, but you might if you don't act now.
Right.
But Seve, what happens when a facility does not have access to those sensors? What do you do?
Yeah, great question, Colin. So yeah, you obviously have to manage those on a case by case basis or a unit by unit basis. So it starts off at the gate, like every other process that we talked about here. And that includes capturing both set temperature, actual temperature, and fuel level of that unit prior to it coming in. Now, a lot of organizations also have minimum thresholds as far as fuel level before that trailer can arrive into the gate. Let me give you a good example. Some organizations may say, you know what? Unless you have your reefer unit at half a tank, we cannot accept your load into the facility. So you're going to have to go out and either fuel up to get to at least half a tank and then bring in that product so that, again, those organizations aren't spending that kind of money on refueling reefers for some other organization.
Mhm.
But once we've captured those three data elements, again, the set temp, actual temp, and fuel level, we can then monitor those three different data elements while that unit's in the yard.
Mhm.
How was that done? Back to your point, you do still do reefer checks, but in the case of our solution, you determine how often you want those reefer checks. Do you want to do them every 2 hours during the winter months and every 4 or 5 hours during the summer months, or vice versa?
Mhm.
You can dictate what that's going to look like. You can also dictate what type of product is on that trailer and what temperature should they be at. Is it frozen foods? Is it perishables? Is it stuff that needs to be kept at room temperature? Is it candy? Candy is a very important one too. I've seen candles. Candles, what temperatures do those need to be kept at? So there's a lot of different commodity types based on location, based on the type of product that has to be kept at certain temperatures so that that product maintains its integrity. Whether it be a chocolate bar looking like a chocolate bar when it reaches a final destination, or a ice cream cone looking frozen once it gets to that consumer as well too.
Mhm.
So those are the types of things that are included when we arrive a trailer. We get that information, and then again, we still do those reefer checks. But the beauty of a good YMS solution is that the YMS solution, which will tell you which traders need to have a reefer check. So instead of doing the entire yard, having somebody go out there and do this on a pen and paper, you actually now can have a tablet and go check those reefer units that have not been checked in that specified period of time. Another thing that we're big proponents of as well too is that anytime someone physically touches that trailer, for example, a yard driver, that they go back there and they update those fuel and temperature levels as well too, so that that doesn't appear on a list for a reefer check later on. So we mitigate that list by doing that as well too. But it's monitoring that reefer unit throughout the entire process. And as it's gone through the life cycle of what it needs to be done inside the yard, you also take those three temperature or two temperatures and fuel levels on the exit of the facility. So if that trader leaves and it arrives at the destination and says, hey, there was damage done to the product when it arrived here, you then have proof through an audit list of what actually that trader went through the entire life cycle of that trader in that yard to identify that, hey, during that life cycle here, we can show you what that temperature was at, what it was set at, and what those fuel levels were. So it helps, again, those organizations make sure that they don't have someone coming back to them stating that, hey, there was some damage done to the material that was inside of that unit. Of course, there's a lot of other things that we can do as well too. We can determine whether that site is going to capture that temperature in Celsius and Fahrenheit. What are the fuel levels that need to be identified as when that reefer unit needs to be refueled again? So there's a lot of other things that we also take into consideration for the setup of the solution. But to your point, once we do have an issue arrive or something that looks like it could be an issue, it's important to alert those customers or alert those sites and make them aware that, hey, there's a reefer unit out there that's down to a quarter of a tank. A task needs to be created to have that reefer unit refilled back up to at least half a tank. And you can manage it much better that way versus having to constantly go out there and do reefer checks 12 times a day, like you mentioned earlier. Instead, it can be done in a much more managed fashion, and it eliminates a lot of the extra work that's also needed or required when you're just doing blind reefer checks to make sure reefers are at the levels that they should be.
Phenomenal discussion, phenomenal points. And I'll throw into there as well that, you know, a lot of operations have single product trailers or single temperature trailers, but there's many others that have multi-temperature zones. And this is something we're really proud of. We came out with this feature earlier this year, support for up to 3 temperature zones within a trailer. So not only can you track what one zone is at, but you can track multiple set temps and multiple actual temps, report on those, receive alerts and awareness on those. And it all ties seamlessly in with the process that Seve just described. We've had nice to have features that we've added into the system over time. In the yard check module, a very clear diagram of where a reefer unit's fuel level is at, a temperature gauge, so you can see exactly where that temperature reading is at, as well as a last check time. So again, as they're doing that yard check, they don't have to check everything. They only check the trailers that need to be checked, that haven't had a touch on them in X amount of time. And all of that is designed not only to give operators peace of mind and management peace of mind, but also to save you time, right? If we can both make sure that your operation is secure, that your product is protected, but also make it so that you're not having to do inordinate checks and wasting time and kind of get in that sweet spot, then the efficiency just increases, right? And time is money. So we're saving you money. And that's the whole point.
Yep.
So kind of to iterate on this discussion a little bit, and to really hone in, there's kind of four main areas in our solution that really targets reefer management. We've talked about them sort of as we've gone here, but just to kind of lay them out, Eagle View is a big one. Eagle View and its partner multi-facility view. Eagle View is a map of the facility, map of the operation. It's got icons of trailers on the screen there, and they change colors depending on what's necessary information. Is it damaged? Is it a live load? And is the reefer needing to be checked, or is there a problem with a reefer unit? So that's a big piece. Multi-facility view then allows you to see a grid of all of those Eagle views on one screen. So for enterprise-wide awareness, you can glance at a facility and know if there's a problem because there's a color that's changed, right? We also have that suite of product protection features that Seve just outlined, and being able to see the set actual and the reefer fuel level, as well as the multiple zones in there. And being, again, alerted and made aware of those problems ties really nicely in with the visual piece of Eagle View, but can also be used to trigger things like in-system alerts, text message notifications, email alerts, and those can be layered. So if an operator needs to know, they can receive an alert, and then if management needs to know if it goes unresolved for a certain amount of time, that can be layered as well. We also then fold in the yard check module into that, and being able to, for those folks on the ground, action those items that need to be actioned, take action, and that ties really nicely in with the whole solution. So as they check things, as they validate, yep, this one's good to go, then the color goes back to normal on Eagle View. So everyone's aware of the current state as well as if there's any problems out there. So let's talk about some cost savings and efficiency on this. Being able to do things like optimize resource utilization, being able to know, for example, what trailers are ready to be moved to a dock door. Seve, you want to talk about pre-cooling a little bit and your experience with that?
Yeah, great point, Colin. So yeah, what we have in the system includes a process which is called a pre-cool task or a pre-cool process. And essentially what all that means is that we can send a task to a yard driver to say, hey, I need you to go to this specific unit and set the temperature for that unit at 32 degrees so that when that trailer is then brought to the dock door, it's at temperature, and you're not opening up the dock doors, opening up and exposing that dock to that hot air coming in from that trailer that's been sitting out in the yard. While they're there, they're also going to check that fuel level. They're going to make sure that that set temp is set to what it's supposed to be, and then they can wait a period of time before they can actually bring that trailer to the dock door. Again, it's a huge cost savings from a standpoint of making sure your infrastructure of your warehouse stays consistent without adding additional heat into the actual warehouse. And you can do the numbers. If you imagine doing that to 10, 20, 30 traders at the same time and bringing in that hot air, it just really increases your footprint from a standpoint of electricity, etc., within the warehouse due to the fact that you're bringing in that warm air into the facility. So we mitigate that and we can eliminate that through the pre-cool process. One other feature that I will share with you that a customer recently brought to my attention as well too, which I thought was a great idea, was that they are actually refueling those reefer units, and then the amount of fuel that goes into that unit is actually being billed back to the original customer. So this customer came to me with this use case, and I was a bit surprised because I thought I had heard it all with regards to reefers at this point. And she tells me, no, we actually refuel them, and then we charge the customer back that fuel amount so that we're not having to pay for it. And I'm thinking, that's genius. I'm surprised more other organizations have not thought of that as well. So as a result of that, we put in an extra field in there where now the person that's actually fueling in those reefers can put in how many gallons of fuel they actually put in that reefer unit. They can then turn around, run reports, and then bill that customer back that amount. Again, super nice features that are included in the solution. But yeah, that pre-cool process is something that I always recommend organizations take advantage of. I've been to some sites where I've talked to about the pre-cool process, and it's like a light bulb goes off on some people's heads and realize, I'm not sure why we had not been doing that in the past. Maybe it's because we didn't have a system that would allow us to do it. But now with this system here, it allows you to do that. Let's go ahead and move forward with using that as part of our overall process to make sure, again, that when we're loading ice cream into a trailer, it's not at 90, 100 degrees based on the temperature outside. It's at a nice, cool 32 degrees, as well as not inviting all that hot air into the warehouse as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk through some examples. I mean, we've been on site enough, man. And it is funny that you say that. This industry, you think you've heard it all, and then somebody comes up with something that is a great idea, and you go, wow, let's share the love on this. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I was talking to a customer. We were on site, and I know you have examples like this as well, Seve, but they were saying, you know what, I've been working with reefer units for my entire career. And I remember when I was, young and green behind the ears, and I was walking around the yard, and I knew for the first time I experienced true spoilage. And I knew it before I ever even opened up the back of the trailer, because the flies buzzing around the asset that had gotten up to 90 degrees inside plus, in the Atlanta heat, in the summertime, just made it smell horrible. But more than that, they just knew, oh shoot, we just lost a bunch of money.
Yeah.
What are some examples that you've been a part of, Seve, both on the positive and the negative, of product protection and seeing the real advances and seeing the real benefits of having a yard management solution that really does this legwork for you? What have you seen that's just worked super, super well to protect customers?
Yeah, and I typically use the example, and I've used this before in other podcasts as well too, of the situation where I worked with a protein producing organization that basically took pigs on hooves and it came out in basically in cartons.
Mm-hmm.
Bacon is very expensive, as we all know. And, I've used this example several times, but it was great to have feedback from the customer, several months afterwards, after we implemented the solution, to share with us that, hey, thank you very much for all of this, because we've now saved a load of bacon that would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past that we don't have to worry about anymore. That's one example. The other examples on the other scale, too. I worked with a Canadian company that was putting liquids into basically a Coke can to name it in a generic way. And inside of that can, they didn't want that product to freeze before it got, when it got to the consumer. So as a result, they were also heating these units up to make sure that those products stayed at a certain temperature. And again, several months pass by and I get a phone call from them, from that particular customer, and says, hey, thanks again for helping us implement this now, because now we can sleep at night knowing that we're not going to send frozen bottles or cans of product to our customers, because the reefer units are being run at a certain temperature to keep that product at a certain temperature, number one. And if anything ever fails, we're going to have a backup system to allow us to understand that that may be occurring in the yard and we can take action on it. So, it's always that type of feedback that makes my day whenever I hear that. And it makes for good storytelling as well too. But it's always it's very how should I put this? It's very engaging, very positive when I hear past customers share that information with me. And some of them are still current customers as well too, that still keep in touch as well too, that we still do business with. So that's always a positive sign, a great way to start conversations when you're talking to a customer that you've been doing business for several years, and you ask, how are the reefer units working, and they're going, you know what, we haven't had any issues. So that's always a great way to start a conversation.
Well, I can share. We have a customer who, I had the chance to sit down and talk with somebody from their operations team at a trade show, and they were just going on and on about the system. And one of the things that they brought up that I hadn't thought about before, this was a series of facilities, but he was giving me an example in one facility specifically. It's a almost lights out facility. A lot of it's automated inside of the warehouse itself. They've got an automated process to bring trailers in, but that central yard piece of the yard driver moves and the reefer management out in the yard was what they really needed our system for. And before bringing on YMS, anytime they needed to find a trailer, somebody from inside of the warehouse, one of the people who actually does work in there, they're in cold weather gear. It's a freezer facility. They were having to take off their big winter jackets, take off their warm pants, take off their boots, put on normal shoes, then walk out in the yard, look around, find the trailer, come back in, put it all back on, and then do their job. And the frustrating thing about that is that that's not just one trailer a day. That's any time they needed to go find something. So each one of those, they estimated about 40 minutes to find a trailer on the yard because of that entire process. After implementing our solution, that went down to 2 minutes looking on a screen, right? They knew they had the confidence and the visibility in the entire process to know that when the system says there's a trailer there, it's true. And that's just, not only has it made the employees' jobs easier, but it saved them a boatload of money in terms of that time of not having to go out and waste that time. The other example I'll give, and this is one that we have a case study for this customer, Cold Point Logistics. And we'll put a link to the case study in the show notes for this podcast episode, so you can take a look. Feel free to download it. It's a PDF document, about 5 pages. And this customer has been with us for a number of years. We sat down and did a case study with them. Before implementing yard management solutions, they were full paper and pencil, right? Everything was manual. There was no digitization. And so it was a pretty big mindset shift to bring on a solution that now you're doing things on tablets, you're doing things on computers, and everything is monitored, everything is tracked. That can be a pretty big mindset shift, especially if you've been working at that facility for several years. To this company's credit, they went all in and they said, we're gonna go for it, right? And this is another cold storage operation. And they experienced some incredible results, 90% improvement in locating trailers, similar to the last customer I shared, just way easier, decreasing from 15 to 20 trailers per day being misplaced to just 2 to 3. Their yard driver moves doubled, right? They experienced increased throughput to the doors of their facilities, and that improved their operational capacity. Fuel efficiency, their yard drivers were not having to do extra moves or deadhead because now they had all of the moves all in one place, so they knew exactly what needed to be moved to which door. And that's, huge, both in terms of driver efficiency and just making the most out of every move, but also the fuel that gets put into those yard driver or yard dog vehicles. They were able to streamline their labor allocation, their revenue growth, elevated customer satisfaction, swift dock door access. I mean, it just goes on and on. But a big one that kept coming up when we were talking to this customer was spoilage prevention, right? Over and over again is protecting that product, giving them peace of mind, letting them know that they don't have to worry because something is keeping track of it for them, and letting them know when there's an issue. And it's hard to put a price on that. Certainly you can when you experience spoilage. But for any operations out there that have not yet come to the point, they go, yeah, our operation is doing the temp checks. We're doing them well. Our folks are on it. First off, kudos. I mean, it's a huge undertaking to get that right. And I have a lot of respect and a lot of gratitude towards operations that are doing that and making the cold chain run. The other thing that I'll say is you don't know when somebody's going to make a mistake. And it's better to have that visibility now than to have to suffer a potential loss later on. The risk is too high, and there's solutions like ours that will just give you that ultimate peace of mind, take away the stress, take away the anxiety, and give you one place to see those results. And we're fortunate, these customers we've talked about, they become super fans. They come to us and they want to do, video interviews. We got some of those on our YouTube channel. They want to do case studies and they want to talk about the system. And I don't know that there's a piece of software that I use personally in my day-to-day job that I just go, yeah, I'm a super fan for this software. But it's wild when you're meeting these people right where they work and right where they live every day, and you're potentially saving jobs. The level of gratitude, it makes it just totally worth it from our end.
Yeah.
Seve, I'm curious for you as we kind of start to wrap up this episode. what are you seeing as far as future trends in the cold chain as it applies to yard management? This could be stuff that you see in the industry or stuff that our company is working on to make our solution as appealing and as applicable to possible to a variety of operations. What's out there right now that if you were to sit down with an operation, you go, hey, this is something to pay attention to?
Yeah, Colin. So yeah, there's a couple of ideas that run across my head real quick. First off is IoT devices. Obviously, now there are IoT devices that you can place inside of a unit to capture those two different set temps and actual temps of the actual unit inside the trader. That's real important, especially if you don't have a monitoring system to be able to do that. That can be very useful in general for operations with reefer units. The second one you touched upon earlier, it's that integration with external systems that we can take that data from an external system that's monitoring those reefer units, consume that data on our part, and then instead of having users looking at two different systems to manage my yard operations and then manage my reefers, all that information can be in one solution. So if an alert happens through our solution, or it could happen through their solution as well too, they can send us that message and we can then forward that message on as well too. So that really streamlines those operations that have access to their own assets information inside of the yard. It's incredibly helpful. And we've had a lot of customers, believe it or not, that have accepted wanting to do that integration piece instead of using those two systems. And it's basically a matter of me explaining to them, look, do you really want your users having to monitor and maintain two separate systems when you can have that data inside of the YMS? You can do all your normal yard operations. You can do the pre-cools like we talked about earlier. We can give you a list of what reefer units need to be checked, when was the last time they were checked, etc. We can tell you what condition they arrived and left at. But in addition to that, instead of having to look at two different separate systems, you're seeing all of that information in the YMS solution. So in essence, you're streamlining that process. You have real-time data coming from the actual units. There's no need to go out there and do reefer checks at that point, unless there's an incident where you may want to go verify something. Essentially, you take the best of both worlds, including the ability of creating tasks within the YMS system to do, like you mentioned earlier, doing those pre-cool tasks to the dock doors. That helps tremendously in providing a better solution overall than just one that's a standalone solution only for the yard or a standalone solution for only your dedicated assets as well.
I love it. That was a great note to end on. Thank you, sir. If you are interested in discussing more with us about reefer management, about the cold chain, if you have an operation and you want to investigate what would it take to get this solution implemented and to help you out with reducing your temp checks, making it easier to find assets, receiving intelligent alerts and awareness, here's what I want you to do. It's very simple. Go on our website, yardmanagementsolutions.com. There's a link on the top right that says request a demo. You click on that, put in your name and email, and we'll be in touch. You're also welcome to follow us on LinkedIn. We're always sharing updates about not only our software, but about the industry. We have a newsletter that we're happy to add you to if you'd like to be added to that. Lots of ways to get in touch with us. Seve and I are both on LinkedIn. Feel free to add us there and continue the conversation. Until next time, thank you very much for listening and watching. We look forward to coming back here in a couple of weeks with another topic.